Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Insight in Conversation. My name is Phoebe Weston Evans, and I'm a project officer at ALIA. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, whom I acknowledge as the traditional owners of this land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present at today's session. Just to start with some Zoom housekeeping, please ensure your microphones are muted while the panelists are speaking, and use the group chat to post questions to the panelists at any stage, and we'll get to them at the end. We are recording this session, and we'll send a link to the recording to you all afterwards, which you're very welcome to share with others who might be interested. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by three distinguished library and information professionals, Jan Richards, Michele Gaca, and Gulcin Cribb, to talk about their transition into retirement, the anticipated risks and rewards, and their rather busy schedules in these new stages of their careers that include mentoring and chairing committees and volunteering and time for passion projects. And I'll introduce them briefly before we get into the conversation. We're going to hear from Jan Richards, AM Falia, who retired in October 2020 after an incredible 48 years in public libraries, the last 26 of which was managing Central West libraries based in Orange in New South Wales. And since retiring, Jan has moved down to Bruny Island in Tasmania and established a consulting company. And second, we have Michele Gaca, who had plans to retire from her role as Chief Librarian at Austin Health and Mercy Hospital for Women in Melbourne when she turned 60. But the outbreak of COVID-19 kept her in her role at a time when her team and her community needed her the most. Michele did retire in August this year. And we also have Gulcin Cribb, who has worked in 4 different countries over her career. Gulcin was planning her retirement for some time before leaving Singapore Management University, where she worked for 8 years as university librarian. And she returned to Australia just one day before restrictions were put in place here. So thank you very, very much, Jan, Michele, and Gulcin for joining me today. And so my first question primarily goes out to Jan, but Michele and Gulcin, please add your thoughts. So Jan, how did you know when it was the right time to move into this next stage of your career?
Well, thanks for the question, Phoebe. And I am joining you today from the lands of the Ngunnawal people of Bruny Island. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And of course you can see beautiful Bruny Island behind me. And that is actually taken from Truganini's Lookout. So a very strong link to the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. But how did I know? Well, that's a really good question, because it's one of those things I had talked to people about for years, and looking at some of the names of people and the faces I can see on screen, I know that you've all had that same conversation. People saying to you, when are you going to retire? And often it's people who are already retired, and you think, are they saying, Jan, you really need to realise that your use by date is gone, or are they trying to get you so that you're retired so you can go out to lunch with them, or what's it all about? And I was really a bit sick of being asked that question, because in my mind, I always felt that I would just know when it was the right time. I had, unusually for me, the one thing that I was on top of was my finances and my superannuation. And that was because of the wonderful guy at Local Government Super who made sure from when I was about 55, I knew exactly where I was and what I could do. And he used to ask me hard questions as well about retirement. But he also used to say to me, don't do it unless you're ready for it, because I see too many people who get pressured into it. So he made me feel good about not, saying I was ready to retire. And I'd also made a couple of commitments. Most notably, I was finishing my 3rd term on the Library Council of New South Wales. And when I took, and each term is a 3-year term. And when I entered into my last term, I made a promise to myself that I would see that out before I went. And so, all that was playing out in my mind. I still didn't have a definite decision. And then we came to Tasmania just before lockdown in March 2020. I came down for a dragon boat regatta on the Derwent. My husband came with me because we'd both been to Tasmania at different times for work, but we'd never been together. And we decided to come to Bruny Island for a holiday, and we fell in love with the place. We didn't think, oh, we're going to retire and move to Bruny Island. Instead, we went home to Orange, where we were living, and we were thinking about coming back to Tasmania and to Bruny for Christmas. And so I booked somewhere for us at Dens Point, where we now live, as to retire, for Christmas. And Google, in the way of the world, recognised that I'd been searching and sent me an email 2 days later and said, you've been looking at accommodation in Dens Point. Look at this house. It's available for sale. And within a week, we'd bought the house in Dens Point, Tasmania, long way, 1,500 kilometres from Orange, and I was on the road to retirement. So it was a very sudden decision. It was, as I said, I always thought, well, I'll know when it's time. And suddenly it was right. The time for me was right. And working in a smaller community like Orange, 40,000 people, I'd never wanted to be the person who retired and was still there and hanging around, and that people would stop me in the supermarket and say, you've got no idea what they're doing to your library, because, you know, once I retired, it wouldn't be my library, and whatever somebody does with it, that's their choice. And so this was great, you know, and I was able to do something, you know, that everyone thought was terribly brave, but I just think is so exciting. And I still keep my links through my consultancy with my networks, but I'm starting a new chapter in my life, and my old library is moving on to a new chapter in its. So it was serendipity.
That's a really beautiful story, Jen. And I suppose it goes to show that it's never too early to start preparing, but also that preparation will stand you in good stead to recognise when the time is just right. Michele and Gulcin, did you want to add anything else to that, or are you happy to leave Jen's?
Yes, I must say that I agree with Jen's comments about people asking you, when are you going to retire? When are you going to retire? And it's a bit boring after a while, because like Jen, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and I didn't like being pressured. And I was wondering, why are they asking this question over and over again? And but I'll let Michele say a few words too on that.
I guess what I got told all the time is you're too young to retire, but that's often from people that found you very valuable and would prefer you didn't. And I often wonder sometimes with people that I've known whether librarians ever really do retire, or whether we just reinvent ourselves, which is why I called it the time of pursuits of choice. And in many ways, I guess I haven't, I've been fortunate in my career, which is one of the questions I was going to answer later, about working in so many different industries, in so many different libraries, that I didn't have that sort of feeling like I'm my last library, I don't mind whatever happens to it. I've done what I can. I've helped the staff there as much as I can, and it's time to let the next chapter take on. So, like Jan said, I'm not attached to whatever happens now, because I've already got my head in a different space. Although I haven't quite left in the traditional sense, but I'll talk about that later.
All right, thank you all three. Now this is mainly for Gulcin, but again, Michele and Jan, please do chime in. I was wondering if there's been anything that has really surprised you about the transition, or anything that you really weren't expecting when you've moved into this new space.
Thank you, Phoebe. By the way, I'm talking to you from Istanbul, from Turkey right now. I'm here to be with my mother, who is not very well and elderly. So it's cold and it's winter here. So greetings from Istanbul. The answer is yes and no, because I was expecting to not have so much time in my hands when I first retired. I thought, well, why am I not as busy as I was before? Maybe I'm not being as productive because I had such an incredibly busy work life, especially in the last 8 years when I was in Singapore. And before that, 4 years in Istanbul, and before that in Australia, of course. But I had just moved back to Australia from Singapore. And as Phoebe said, it was the day before Australia locked down. And I was just so busy organizing the logistics of moving from one country to another, moving back to our house, which is just north of Byron Bay, by the way, in northern New South Wales. But I was not surprised because I had already planned what I was going to do. I have been very much involved in IFLA. I'm the chair of IFLA Academic and Research Libraries section, which keeps me very busy. And because of COVID, we pivoted very quickly to virtual events and virtual meetings. And so I was just so involved in IFLA related businesses, and I was getting a lot of requests to do presentations, including ALIA. I made a lot of presentations there, and I was mentoring. I was part of the mentoring section, and I'm still mentoring in Singapore, in Turkey, in Australia. So I love it. I'm just so busy, but I'm also finding a lot of time to do things like walking on the beach and enrolling in an edX course on architecture, and just having fun things like cooking and so on. But I'm not looking back, just like my other two colleagues. I'm very happy for whatever my colleagues are doing in their libraries, in my previous library. And it's just really lovely watching them thrive and doing great things. And I'm very happy where I am at the moment.
It seems like you've managed to keep a really nice mixture of intellectual stimulation through IFLA and also through mentoring so many different people in different countries. And you have this time now for cooking and walking on the beach. It makes me feel quite jealous. It sounds really nice.
Yes, well, I also had to learn to say no to some of those invitations because I keep on getting invitations to make presentations, but I actually don't mind doing reviews. I review papers and articles and things like that, which is quite fun because it keeps you on your toes and you're keeping up. So it's great.
And you get to cherry pick just the ones the kinds of involvement that you want. Michele and Jan, did you have any other things that surprised you or took you by surprise when you moved into this retirement stage?
Well, I guess I thought I was going to have more time than I do. And but for me, it's partly because I'm not very good at saying no, a bit like Gulcin, and I'm very involved in IFLA and in ALIA. But for me, physically, because of living on an island, off an island, at the end of a very windy dirt road, the logistics of living here, it's taking a while to get used to. So I went up to Hobart yesterday for some meetings for Libraries Tasmania, and it's 56 kilometres, but the round trip is 5 hours. So it's that, and I'm just having to, instead of being literally 5 minutes from work or a 30-minute flight from Sydney, that whole logistics is bringing a different perspective. But at the same time, I'm becoming much better at managing my time. So if I go off island, as we say, I do a lot of things together, and I'm a great user of Libraries Tasmania's e-audio books to listen while I'm in the car. So it's exciting. I still get on that ferry and feel the distance between me and reality, and I love it. So yeah.
Yeah, time is always the conundrum. Michele, has your time?
Well, I was just going to say time is just a very interesting construct, and I think one of the things over my career and time is that, and I think, many of you that are more my age would agree, you went to school, you went to uni, you did your degree, then you went to the work, and there was all these sort of time frames in which you do things. And I think that the beauty of the world today is that you can do it in such a different manner. And it's okay to pursue one thing, then, you know, take some time out, you know, do those micro qualifications now. You know, the education system has moved on and allows us to be more flexible. Whereas I was locked into uni, say, for, I think it was something like 14 years straight, part-time, doing, you know, I've got 3 degrees, so I suppose I decided to do it the hard way. But, you know, nonetheless, if you wanted to diversify and do different things. So, you know, and then of course, retirement, it just like you have supposedly more time, although my husband did say to me yesterday, have you actually retired or are you just not getting paid anymore? I thought, yes, well, you know, that's my overstimulation around the intellectual stimulation side of my job. I was a bit scared of not having enough to do. And I have to say that possibly the current state of the world has probably added to that, when we can, you know, not do as much as we'd like. But yeah, that's my comment on time and change.
Thanks very much. And following on from those wise words, I have another question for you, Michele. Well, it's mainly for you, and we can hear from Jan and Gulcin too. So now that you have more or less substantially completed the full-time paid employment stage of your career, and this is a question for me as well, coming into the profession from a different from another one. What would you like those who are coming into the profession to know now?
Well, I sat down and did a little bit of math, and I gave up at about, you know, I was looking at my length of career, and I've had over 20 jobs, and I've worked for more than 15 different organisations within that. So my comment would be, you know, our profession is the most amazing, I think, there is. We don't need to limit ourselves. We can work for all industries, because information management is at the key of so much. And I think too, sometimes as librarians, we put up artificial boundaries of where we think we fit within, you know, different industries. And really, I think librarians have universal skills that we can adapt to practically any job. So, and I think our profession has moved on a little bit from being solely seen as curators and archivists of paper. And I think now, although that's still really important and skill to have, but I think we're, you know, seen too as now curators of, you know, information and knowledge, and we can apply this to any sort of organisation. And I think the pandemic has really helped. And, you know, this e-generation, which is coming on board, is just terrific. I just think there's just boundless opportunities for anyone in this field. So I guess, you know, I still want to be engaged. I'm still doing things on the side for different parts of the organisation that I just work for in a different way, things I wanted to do rather than sort of what I considered, you know, my old job, which I love to death, but, you know, is very administrative, very management orientated. And there comes a time in my life, and probably Jan and Gulcin would say too, that maybe we didn't want to do that anymore. I might actually just want to do a lit search and really enjoy it and learn from it, which, you know, my previous job wasn't necessarily allowing me to do. So, yeah, I think we've grown beyond the sort of, I know IT, information technology have taken over some, but we're really the next step beyond that. We really understand how, you know, knowledge influences, because I mean, let's face it, you know, we used to be the custodians of books. And why do people read books? Because they want to step outside their current boundaries and get a feel for something different, and or, you know, read something and think, oh yes, that's right, you know, my ideas are not really so way off the beat. You know, reading a book can give you confidence in knowing how to pursue where you want to go. You know, sort of, that's why we're custodians of physical libraries sometimes. You know, our skills in selecting books have always been highly acknowledged. So yeah, I just think that, you know, it's a profession with endless boundaries, and we're one of the most agile group of people. And what I love the most is how connected we are. Never forget, we're never on our own. I used to work for CSIRO. They used to say, you'll never leave the CSIRO family. And that's so true. And it just so nice today to see Derek, who was one of my mentors back when I was younger. And I'm just really touched that he's here today. And I just, you know, like, you know, Jan said, and Gulcin, you know, we are always there to help and support and, you know, give to those around us. But it's not just those older guard we learn from. Like, there's so many people, like, you know, my previous team members, you know, they're a much younger generation than me, but I've just learnt so much from them too. And I hope that, you know, it's always a sharing opportunity. So yeah, I mean, who would be anything else but a librarian, I say.
That's a really nice response. Thank you, Michelle. And I think that the idea that librarians and information professionals move there where people want to find information is a really, really nice and kind of visual idea that we don't just stick behind books. We move to there where we might be needed. Gulcin and Jan.
Yeah, can I just say that? Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, once a librarian, you're always a librarian. It's you can't get out of it, and it's a kind of profession that it doesn't matter whether you are retired or not. You're always thinking very broadly in terms of the whole profession. I never worked in public libraries. I always worked in academic and research libraries, but I'm really enjoying being a member of Friends of Byronshire Libraries, where I am, and I'm helping them fundraise and learning more about public libraries from a friend's point of view, and advocating for libraries, lobbying and advocating for libraries within the greater community. I was just recently invited to give a speech of my career as a librarian to members of the Byronshire community. And it was amazing the kinds of questions we got. I shouldn't really be amazed because we often hear, you know, you must read a lot of books and all those kinds of things. But it's always a wonderful opportunity to talk about the library profession and the changing role of libraries to a very eclectic community of people in Byronshire. The other thing is that I feel very privileged that I have been part of this profession, this global community, which is so supportive and it's so collaborative. I don't think that there are too many professions in the world who are so collaborative and helpful to each other. And we're very, very lucky. I have been very privileged and fortunate that I've had mentors in the profession throughout my career, not just in Australia, but in other countries as well. And like the others, I really enjoy giving it back to the community, giving it back to the profession too. But I'd also like to add that the young generation, the new generation of librarians are just amazing. I'm so impressed with what they're doing. They're so smart and dedicated and committed that it just makes me feel, wow, isn't it fabulous that the profession is evolving, continuing, and reinventing itself. And I once said that librarianship may not be the oldest profession in the world, but we're probably the second oldest profession. And we've been around for over 2 millennia. And we keep on reinventing ourselves because we are so agile and we're so flexible, we're so resilient. And I don't care what some people say, but we are contributing in our own ways to the community. And I'm so pleased to hear that many people say, I must always have a librarian in my committee because it really makes a big difference. Thank you.
Mm.
Thanks, Gulcin. Jan, did you have anything else to add?
I would just totally support what Michele and Gulcin said. And, you know, I still pinch myself literally for the journey I've had in libraries. And I think if you take the opportunities that are offered to you, you can go anywhere and it's wonderful and you meet wonderful people along the way and you make a difference in the world. So it's, you know, I am so blessed that that's what I ended up doing by sheer chance. It's a bit of serendipity, the same as, you know, retirement. My becoming a librarian was serendipitous, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm. Can I just say, when I used to work at a place called Ernst & Young, and I managed the Knowledge and Research Centre, so I was talking to one of the senior partners one day in the tea room, as you do, making a cup of tea. And he said, "You've got the most amazing team." He said, "You know so much about this and whatever, and, what are your degrees in?" And of course, we had each a degree in a certain specialty. I said, "But, we're just all librarians." And he went, "Librarians? I didn't even know we employed librarians." I said, "Oh, you've got quite a few of them." I said, "Where do you think we learn how to do all these things for you?" It was just a very interesting time. I know this was about 16, 17 years ago, so, things have moved on, but it's just interesting how appreciative of the skills, and even, blown away by the fact that, oh my gosh, this is what librarians do. Because so often, and not on this call, but they, the general population are exposed to public libraries, which is very important. And we've learned through the pandemic just how important the community feel about their public libraries. But it's a different skill set. For many of us on the call today are also in the special area.
I'd just like to go into the chat, because there's a couple of questions and they're all relating to a similar thing. So I know some of you have answered them in the chat, but to bring it out, there's a question from Gail Smith, which relates to Stephen Harris's and Andrew Finnegan's, which is to do with whether Gail Smith was asking whether you went through a staged transition from full-time to part-time to retirement. And that links to Andrew and Stephen's question about finding that balance, still having this like fabulous high-flying career, but also finding time for yourselves and personal development, and how to try and get that balance right. Is there an easy answer?
I guess in my, as I spoke to Andrew before, I looked at what the components of retirement were. And because we're all librarians, we love a good book. Someone recommended this book to me, but it was about having, the funds, the friends, the hobbies, and the intellectual stimulation. And I guess the balance is really hard. I've probably overcommitted a little bit in the things that I'm going to do, that I've got a couple of honorary roles, but at the same time, I'm transitioning over the next 3 years in winding some of those things down. But, the paid employment side of things, I just sort of went cold turkey, I guess, if you like. And that's okay. For me, that's a feasible option. And then it's I'm actually doing things that I'm very passionate about, and working in data analytics and working with the diabetes and obesity team to, reduce the amount of type 2 diabetes if one can. So they're things that I want to contribute my time to, as well as our ALIA NHQHS searches.
And I would say, and I've said this in the side, that I am still working. I'm doing some consultancy and I'm very involved in IFLA and ALIA, but I see that as a transitional role. And a senior member of the library world in Australia made a comment to me when I was doing this at the beginning, that your skills are only valuable for so many years after you retire, because your currency expires. And she at that stage was saying, I am now going to retire in her early 70s, because I feel now that I have given back. I'm there as a mentor for people, but in some areas I'm not as valuable as I used to be. And I think that's one of those things too, about thinking about when it is time to finally step away.
Yes, I fully support what Jan said, and I feel that the first 2 years of my retirement, after my retirement, I will continue giving back to the profession, and I will continue keeping up with whatever is going on. But yes, the currency will expire, and there's no point in hanging in there. And there are always so many other things that one can do. In terms of volunteer roles, things like helping with friends of libraries, and some other activities within the community. I mean, look at me, here I am in Istanbul. If I was still in full-time employment, I wouldn't be able to travel under these conditions and come and spend 7-8 weeks here with my family, which kind of is a wonderful thing to do, because during employment, the amount of time you can take to do things for the family is very, very limited.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, our half an hour is up. 30 minutes is never quite enough. It has been really, really terrific and edifying to talk to you, Jan, Michele, and Gulcin, about your careers and the move into what we're calling retirement, but isn't perhaps retirement. And I'm sure there's been much food for thought for those of you who, like me, are moving into the profession, and those of you who might be thinking of moving into a new stage. And I think one thing that really comes across is the degree to which people working in this profession really are lifelong contributors, and that their experience is always valued. So thank you once again for talking with me and for your time. Thanks to Jackie, who's been on tech. We'll be back for another Insight and Conversation in February 2022 to coincide with the next edition of Insight magazine, which will be on the theme of beginnings. And if you'd like to write for Insight, submissions for the following issue, which is on the theme of inclusion, are open until January 18th. So you can email insight@alia.org.au if you'd like to do that. Until the next time, thanks very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.